She said I was wrong, but the moment she walked away with him, I realized I'd been blind all along. It's emotionally charged, hints at regret and unspoken feelings, and immediately sparks curiosity. If you want, I can give 5 more hook variations optimized for YouTube clicks and SEO around age gap romance and forbidden attraction. Do you want me to do that? Emotional goal. Introduce the emotional friction between the male narrator and the woman, establishing the slow burn tension that will drive the story. The goal is to let the audience feel the male narrator's mixture of admiration, curiosity, and restrained longing. We want viewers to sense that something unspoken exists beneath polite disagreements, and that every small gesture carries emotional weight. Narrative progression. The story begins with the male narrator noticing her presence, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet details that make her impossible to ignore. She is confident, graceful, and self-assured, yet there is a subtle vulnerability that only he seems to sense. Their first few interactions are professional and restrained. A difference of opinion during a discussion, a gentle correction of his ideas. Yet even in conflict, there is warmth in her tone, a rhythm to her voice that makes him listen more intently. The tension is not loud. It's in the spaces between words. When she disagrees, her eyes linger on his face for just a fraction longer than necessary, almost as if waiting for him to respond in a way that satisfies her. He notices the smallest details. The way her fingers tap lightly on the edge of the desk when she's thinking, the faint smile she suppresses when he hesitates to answer, the quiet steadiness of her presence even when she's challenging him. These moments plant the seeds of curiosity, an emotional pull the narrator doesn't fully understand yet. Sensory-rich details. The story should immerse the audience in the physical and emotional subtleties of their early interactions. Describe the scent of her perfume lingering in the air after she passes by, the warmth of her hand brushing against his as she hands him a folder, the subtle tilt of her head when she listens, and the way her eyes shift when she's trying not to show amusement or surprise. Even mundane office spaces become charged with energy. A coffee cup shared, a chair pulled closer, a file slid across the desk that barely touches his fingers. Her presence evokes an emotional resonance in him, a quiet awareness of her steadiness, her confidence, and the unspoken invitation to know her better. His internal monologue should capture the tension of admiration mixed with hesitation. He feels drawn to her, but knows that any overt move could disrupt the delicate balance between them. Purpose. This part of the story sets the stage for a slow-burning, emotional connection. The audience begins to understand the male narrator's perspective and the subtle ways in which she influences his emotions without realizing it. The friction, disagreements paired with quiet intimacy, creates a tension that keeps viewers emotionally invested. By focusing on small gestures, lingering looks, and restrained physicality, this section builds anticipation for the deeper emotional and romantic developments that will unfold in later parts. The key is restraint. The romantic tension is implied, not overt, and the audience is drawn in by what is felt rather than explicitly acted upon. This quiet, emotionally observant opening primes viewers to care deeply about the evolving connection between these two characters. Emotional goal. Deepen the emotional intimacy between the male narrator and the woman. Shift from the initial tension to moments of subtle connection, where their vulnerability and human warmth begin to surface. The audience should start to feel the allure of their growing closeness, sensing that these small interactions are charged with unspoken meaning. Narrative progression. After the initial friction and disagreements, the male narrator begins to notice her beyond her confident exterior. It's in the quiet, almost accidental moments where personality and vulnerability peek through. Maybe they're working late together on a project or sharing a quiet break in a cafe, and he starts observing her habits. The way she tucks a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she's focused, the soft exhale she releases when she thinks no one is watching, the way her laughter rises lightly, almost shyly, when a small joke lands perfectly. These moments are not dramatic. They are ordinary scenes imbued with subtle intimacy. He starts noticing how she reacts to his presence differently than others. A slight lean closer when explaining something, a brief brush of her hand on his as she hands him a pen, the way her eyes linger just a heartbeat longer when he offers an opinion she respects. Each gesture communicates warmth, attentiveness, and an unspoken acknowledgement of their connection, even if neither of them names it aloud. Sensory-rich details focus on the physical and emotional textures of these interactions. The gentle warmth of her hand when passing him a cup of coffee, the quiet rustle of her clothes as she adjusts her seat nearby, the soft cadence of her voice that lingers in the air long after she's spoken. Even the environment becomes a vessel for connection. The golden glow of the evening sun through a window, the faint hum of computers around them, the quiet comfort of sitting side by side without the need for constant conversation. Her presence evokes a subtle emotional response in him, a calm that contrasts with the excitement of earlier tension. He begins to anticipate these moments, cherishing the small exchanges, the shared silence, and the unspoken understanding that grows between them. These quiet interactions make him aware of his growing attachment and desire, tempered by respect and the awareness of boundaries. Purpose. This section establishes the foundation for the emotional bond that will carry the story forward. By focusing on ordinary yet intimate moments, the audience feels the slow accumulation of connection. The tension evolves from external disagreements to internal realization. He recognizes her uniqueness and feels drawn to her in ways he cannot yet articulate. The subtlety of their closeness keeps the romance YouTube safe, yet emotionally rich. The audience begins rooting for their relationship, sensing that beneath the everyday gestures lies a profound emotional resonance. This is where the slow burn takes root. The warmth, shared attention, and small touches create a magnetic pull that will intensify in later parts of the story. Emotional goal. Heighten romantic tension by showing the push and pull between desire and restraint. The audience should feel the magnetic yet cautious connection between the male narrator and the woman. Their closeness is intoxicating, yet both are careful not to overstep, creating a delicate emotional dance. Narrative progression. After establishing quiet intimacy in the previous part, a moment arises that challenges both characters emotionally. Perhaps a disagreement about work or life choices escalates into a heartfelt exchange, where honesty and vulnerability collide. In this moment, their connection becomes more palpable. She challenges him in ways that make him defensive but also reflective, and he notices her attention on him sharpening, as if she's reading his reactions like an open book. Their conversations start to carry an undercurrent of tension, pauses that linger longer than necessary, glances that seem accidental but feel deliberate, words that could be playful or pointed depending on interpretation. The male narrator begins to recognize a physical awareness he didn't have before. The warmth when she steps closer to explain something, the brief brush of her arm against his when gesturing, the subtle tilt of her head as if inviting him to meet her gaze. These touches are fleeting, restrained, yet heavy with meaning. Sensory-rich details focus on the physical and emotional subtleties that make this stage so compelling. When she moves closer to point something out in a shared notebook, her breath brushes against his wrist. Her eyes meet his in a pause that feels like time stretching, the quiet intensity of her stare sending a jolt through him. Even the small movements, a finger tracing a line in a document, a pen accidentally brushing his hand, a light laugh at a minor mistake, become charged with unspoken desire. His internal struggle is central here. He wants to reach out, to linger in the proximity, but restraint and respect hold him back. He notices the rapid pulse in his chest when she leans near, the way his mind tracks her every gesture, and the tension builds without a single word being said about romance. The emotional pull is visceral. He is aware of both longing and hesitation, and the audience feels that duality keenly. Purpose. This section solidifies the almost but not yet energy essential for slow burn romance. It shows that the emotional bond is moving beyond mere friendship or professional respect, yet both characters exercise subtle restraint, making the tension palpable and compelling. By keeping physical gestures and touches meaningful but safe, the story remains YouTube appropriate while still deeply immersive. The push and pull dynamic ensures that the audience is emotionally invested. They see that the male narrator's admiration and desire are growing, while the woman's attention and subtle vulnerability make her increasingly magnetic. These moments of closeness, tension, and restraint set the stage for the introduction of external conflict in the next part, when another man enters her life, and make the eventual emotional stakes feel higher and more consequential. Emotional goal. Introduce a source of external conflict that intensifies the male narrator's emotional struggle. The audience should feel the tension shift from internal restraint to jealousy, longing, and uncertainty. This part emphasizes the fragility of slow-burn romance. The connection between the characters is real, but circumstances introduce a challenge. Narrative progression. After building quiet intimacy and emotional push and pull, the story introduces another man into her life, someone who embodies confidence, social ease, and immediate compatibility. Unlike the male narrator, who is more reserved and contemplative, this new presence is charismatic and effortlessly engaging. His arrival is subtle at first. A shared conversation at a social gathering, a chance meeting in a cafe, or a collaborative project at work. The female character responds in ways that surprise the narrator. She laughs more openly at this man's jokes, leans slightly closer than she does with the narrator, and allows herself a warmth that had been rare in his presence. The narrator watches, conflicted, admiration for her choice mingled with a sting of jealousy and helplessness. He begins to recognize that connection is not solely built on shared attention or emotional depth. Timing, circumstance, and chemistry all play roles that are sometimes beyond control. Sensory-rich details. The power of this scene comes from small but significant sensory cues. The narrator notices the brush of her hand on the new man's arm. Casual, confident, easy, contrasted with the careful restraint she has shown with him. He feels the hollow space of her absence when she laughs and glances toward the newcomer, her hair catching the light in a way that had previously gone unnoticed. Even the sound of her voice shifts slightly, softer and more relaxed, as if the new presence brings out a version of her he has not seen before. The male narrator's internal world is charged with emotional intensity. He feels a tightening in his chest, a restless tension in his limbs, and the quiet ache of longing. Yet he also experiences the quiet admiration that comes from seeing someone he cares for express joy, even if it is not directed at him. The juxtaposition of desire and respect creates an emotional cocktail that keeps the audience deeply engaged. Purpose. This part of the story introduces stakes and conflict without forcing melodrama. It demonstrates that slow-burn romance is not just about mutual attraction, but also about timing, choices, and the unpredictability of life. By showing the female character's natural, human responses to another person, the story emphasizes realism and emotional depth. It also sets the stage for the narrator's self-reflection and internal struggle in the next part. He must reconcile his feelings of longing, jealousy, and admiration, which heightens the audience's emotional investment. The story continues to maintain subtle, YouTube-safe romance through physical gestures, glances, brief touches, body language, and internal emotional resonance rather than explicit action. The audience now feels the tension of potential loss, understanding that while connection exists, it is not guaranteed, a key ingredient for slow-burn emotional storytelling. Emotional goal. Illustrate the male narrator's growing self-awareness and emotional awakening. The audience should feel his internal struggle, the tension between admiration, desire, and the quiet ache of potentially losing her. This is the point where emotional stakes deepen, showing that slow-burn romance is as much about reflection and restraint as it is about connection. Narrative progression. After observing her warmth toward the other man, the male narrator begins to reflect on his own feelings more honestly. He realizes that his admiration for her has evolved into something deeper, a longing he had not fully acknowledged before. He starts noticing small details he might have overlooked in the past. The subtle curl of her hair when the light hits it just right, the way her eyes crinkle when she laughs, and the quiet steadiness in her presence that grounds him emotionally. These reflections are accompanied by small, almost unconscious gestures of care. Perhaps he notices her struggling with a heavy coat or a stack of papers and steps in instinctively. Or he leaves a cup of coffee nearby, knowing she likes it just so, without expecting acknowledgement. These acts are subtle yet intimate, and they reveal a side of him shaped by genuine concern rather than desire for reciprocation. Sensory-rich details. The narrative should immerse the audience in sensory moments that communicate both longing and restraint. For instance, he might feel the warmth of her hand briefly brush against his while returning a document, the faint perfume she wears lingering in his clothes long after she leaves, or the soft rustle of her skirt as she moves around the room, each sound and movement drawing his attention involuntarily. When she speaks, her voice carries a gentle rhythm. Like a quiet melody, he finds himself memorizing without realizing. He also experiences emotional sensations that mirror physical ones. The hollow ache when she laughs with the other man, the flutter of anticipation when she turns toward him unexpectedly, the subtle tightness in his chest when she looks away, seemingly oblivious to his gaze. These moments make him keenly aware of the depth of his feelings and the reality that he may be too late to act on them. Purpose. This part of the story deepens the emotional resonance by showing the narrator's internal struggle, a mix of admiration, regret, and longing. The audience begins to understand the stakes more fully. His love is real and profound, but timing and circumstance are testing it. By focusing on small gestures, sensory-rich interactions, and introspective reflection, the story maintains YouTube-safe romance while creating tension and empathy. The male narrator's restraint, emotional awareness, and subtle acts of care make his character relatable and endearing, keeping viewers emotionally invested in his journey. The stage is now set for the story's emotional climax, her eventual choice and departure. The audience is prepared to experience both the poignancy of loss and the bittersweet beauty of his silent love, making the next part even more impactful. Emotional goal. Deliver the emotional climax of the story. The audience should feel the bittersweet intensity of loss, longing, and the quiet heartbreak of unfulfilled desire. This moment emphasizes that slow-burn romance is not always about union, but about emotional truth and human complexity. Narrative progression. After subtle realizations and small acts of care, the story reaches its pivotal moment. She makes the choice to leave with the other man. It is not a dramatic confrontation. There is no shouting or accusation, just the quiet inevitability of timing, circumstance, and personal choice. The male narrator watches, aware that the connection they shared, though genuine and tender, may never fully materialize into what he secretly hoped for. The tension here is drawn from restraint and subtlety. Perhaps it is a final meeting at a shared space, a cafe, office, or hallway, where they exchange brief words. She speaks warmly, but with an air of finality, her tone both gentle and decisive. The male narrator notices every small gesture, every micro-expression, because he has grown attuned to her nuances. The way she smooths her hair nervously, the brief touch of her hand on his arm as a silent acknowledgement, and the lingering glance she casts before stepping away. Sensory-rich details. The power of this scene comes from immersion in sensory experience. The faint brush of her coat against his shoulder as she turns, the quiet click of her heels fading down the corridor, and the lingering warmth of her presence in the room all heighten the emotional impact. He remembers the perfume she always wears, which seems stronger in memory than reality, and the subtle softness of her voice as she speaks one last time. Each small sensory detail amplifies his awareness of her absence as soon as she moves out of reach. Internally, The male narrator feels a mix of heartache and reverence. There is a hollow ache in his chest, a flutter of longing that cannot be satisfied, and yet a quiet admiration for the way she navigates her own desires and choices. The emotional weight is palpable. He realizes that love is not about possession, but about appreciation and respect, even when it leads to personal loss. Purpose. This section provides the story's emotional climax. The audience experiences the bittersweet beauty of slow-burn romance. The connection was real, meaningful, and transformative, yet circumstances and timing prevent it from fully materializing. The narrative emphasizes emotional truth over dramatic spectacle, making the moment deeply human and relatable. By keeping physical gestures subtle, a fleeting hand touch, a shared look, a pause in movement, the romance remains YouTube-safe while still carrying profound emotional resonance. The male narrator's internal reflections create catharsis for the audience, blending longing, respect, and acceptance into a poignant emotional experience. This departure prepares the story for its final reflective resolution, allowing viewers to process the bittersweet intensity of love that is deeply felt but not fully realized, and sets up the emotional payoff in the next and final part. Emotional goal. Provide a satisfying emotional resolution that blends bittersweet longing with personal growth. The audience should feel the male narrator's acceptance, the lasting impact of the relationship, and the quiet beauty of unspoken love. This section emphasizes introspection, closure, and the human capacity to cherish connections, even when they are not fully realized. Narrative progression. After her departure, the male narrator is left alone with his thoughts and memories. The story slows down here, inviting the audience into the quiet inner world of reflection. He revisits the moments they shared, the fleeting touches, shared laughter, and subtle gestures of care that were never dramatic but always meaningful. He recalls her warmth, her quiet confidence, and the unspoken intimacy that existed in the small spaces between words and actions. Rather than bitterness or resentment, he experiences a gentle acceptance. He understands that love is not always about possession or reciprocity. Sometimes it is about witnessing the happiness of someone you care for and cherishing the time you had together. The emotional journey that began with tension, grew through connection, and climaxed in departure now finds its resolution in reflection. He is aware of the void she leaves, yet he carries the imprint of her presence in a way that strengthens his own sense of self and capacity for love. Sensory-rich details. The storytelling remains vivid and immersive. He sits in the soft glow of morning light, holding a warm cup of coffee, the steam curling in front of him like the ghost of moments past. He can almost feel the brush of her hand, the warmth of her presence, the faint lingering scent of her perfume. Even the quiet rustle of papers on his desk evokes memories of shared spaces, conversations, and unspoken understanding. His body responds to memory as if it were real, a tightening in the chest when recalling her laughter, the soft warmth that spreads through him when remembering her smile, and the flutter of hope that such connections are possible again, even if with someone else. The sensory details reinforce the emotional depth, making the audience feel the persistence of affection, memory, and longing. Purpose. This final keynote emphasizes emotional growth and human resonance. The male narrator's journey concludes not with a reunion, but with understanding and self-awareness. He has learned the value of subtle connection, the importance of restraint, and the quiet power of love that leave a lasting impression. The audience experiences closure and emotional satisfaction without relying on melodrama or unrealistic resolutions. The slow-burn romance finds its conclusion in the blend of longing, appreciation, and hope. His reflections underline the theme that love is often transformative even when it is unfulfilled. The story closes with a warm, human tone, bittersweet, introspective, and deeply resonant. It reminds viewers that emotional intimacy, quiet gestures, and the courage to feel deeply are as significant as romantic culmination. By ending on reflection rather than reunion, the narrative honors the authenticity of human emotion, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of beauty, growth, and emotional connection, the hallmark of a truly slow-burn romantic story.